Mom is struggling to get by on her pension, and we, who are still able to work, should lend her a hand, shouldn't we? During the discussion about inheritance following their father's passing, Billy, the second son, earnestly addresses his brother and sister-in-law. However, it appears his words didn't quite strike a chord with them. How about we consider that just because she's relying on her pension, doesn't mean we're obligated to hand over our hard-earned money? Suggests Billy. Exactly. Is our mother-in-law expecting us to foot her bills? Adds his wife. Suddenly, the eldest son and his wife shoot me looks as though they've tasted something sour, a gaze not befitting of one's parents. Stop trying to sponge off us, it's becoming a nuisance. The pensioner should fend for herself, except for special occasions like weddings and funerals. Stay out of our affairs, they retort. Hey, that's enough, Billy interjects, but I find myself looking down, clenching my fists. Not only are they seemingly impatient for my husband's demise, but they're also griping about inheritance and have labeled me a freeloader. Perhaps I've raised Billy wrong. I can't endure it any longer. Yet I address the eldest son and his wife calmly. I understand your perspective. Let's sever our ties. My name is Catherine, and I'm turning 65 this year. I live with my retired husband, who is kind and supportive. Together, we've raised 2 children. Dan, our eldest son, and Billy, our second. Recently, we've considered renovating our aging home, hoping to live with Dan and his wife, Rebecca, once the renovations are complete. When I broached the topic with Dan over the phone, his reluctance was palpable. Living together? Spare me. Rebecca won't like it either, he retorted. But if we're investing in renovations for our shared benefit, shouldn't it also accommodate their needs? However, from the other end of the line, I could almost hear Rebecca scoff. Living together? That's utterly impossible. I see. Let's just drop this conversation, I said, feeling the weight of the eldest son and his wife's usual superiority complex and cold demeanor. After I hung up, I relayed Dan and the other's sentiments to my husband, exactly as they were. He wore a somewhat lonely expression but spoke up cheerfully. Can't be helped. Let's focus on making the renovations for our comfort in old age. Following that decision, our home was remodeled to our liking, transformed into a barrier-free space. Several months later, scheduled for a meal with both our sons and their wives, Billy and Anne, our second son, arrived first. Anne, always considerate, handed me a hostess gift and immediately offered to help in the kitchen. Mother-in-law, you're always so good at cooking, she praised. Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for your help, Anne, I replied. As we chatted, the eldest son and his wife arrived, plopping heavily onto the sofa and demanding tea. Observing me preparing it, Rebecca and Dan grumbled impatiently. They have no consideration, Rebecca complained. Exactly, we're guests here. Hurry up, Dan added. Just as I was about to serve them, Billy approached Dan quietly from the side. Dan, can't you at least do that much by yourself? He whispered. Shut up, Dan snapped back. At Dan's harsh words, I sighed inwardly. Billy and Anne were kind, yet even they faced Dan's overbearing attitude. However, we had called both siblings together for an important discussion. As dinner commenced, Dan, eating grumpily, broke the silence. Hey Dad, since you called us here, you must have some business. Spit it out. My husband looked at me, and I nodded slightly. The truth is, it has been found that I have lung cancer. Billy and Anne showed genuine surprise, while the expressions of the eldest son and his wife remained unchanged. Dad, cancer? What's the current situation? Starting next week, I'll be hospitalized, I began, the weight of my words heavy in the air. They told me the cancer has spread all over my body, and I've got about 6 months left. That can't be. Well, dreadful news, Dan muttered, almost as if it were someone else's burden. Rebecca chimed in, you can't beat age, right? My uncle quickly passed away from stomach cancer too. Thoughtless words pricked at me, and I couldn't help but raise my voice. Would you two just stop it? I interjected. It's fine, but... My husband's gentle voice calmed me down as he turned his attention to his children. I want you guys to look after your mother after I'm gone. Of course, Dad, we'll take care of Mom, so don't worry, the second son and his wife assured us firmly. Yes, please think about your own health, father-in-law, they added. However, the eldest son and his wife seemed disengaged, absorbed in their cell phones, not seeming to register their father's words at all. As the meal concluded, everyone began to depart. Since the eldest son and his wife left quickly, I stepped outside to see off the second son and his wife. Mom, I know it's tough, but hang in there. We'll also help, of course. Please let us know anything. Billy expressed sincerely. Thank you, Billy, I replied softly, touched by his kindness. With that heartfelt conversation, I bid farewell to the second son and his wife. My husband opted for palliative care over surgery and chemotherapy, so he was admitted to a hospice the following week. I began visiting the hospice almost daily, with my second son and his wife driving me and assisting in my husband's care. However, no matter how much I reached out, the eldest son and his wife never made an appearance. Then, about 5 months later, my husband's condition took a turn for the worse. I called the eldest son and his wife, informing them that this might be the end. Reluctantly, they appeared, but Dan neither held his father's hand, nor uttered a word to him. Instead, they merely stared at my frail husband as though he were a repulsive sight. We've shown our faces, isn't that enough? We have matters to attend to, so we'll be leaving now, the elder couple announced abruptly, exiting the hospital room not even 10 minutes after their arrival. As soon as they left, I noticed Rebecca grabbing her jacket. Hastily, I rushed after them. Approaching the staircase leading to the hallway, I saw them descending slowly, engrossed in their conversation and oblivious to my presence. It really seems like Dad's time is near. Hey, what's going to happen to the inheritance when father-in-law is gone? Dan smiled at Rebecca's question. Dad was just a regular employee, but Mom and the rest have been living quite comfortably lately, haven't they? Maybe they've been investing in the stock market or something. We could probably expect a decent inheritance. Haha, Rebecca chuckled. Oh, I can't wait. I've been longing for an overseas trip. I also want to design my own handbag. All we can do now is wait for things to wrap up, Dan remarked. Listening to their conversation, tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't possibly bring myself to tell my husband about this. Unable to confront them, I silently returned to the hospital room. 2 weeks later, he passed away. I remained by his side for a long time, but it was Billy and his wife who offered me comfort, their support a solace in the midst of grief. I managed to hold myself together, and the funeral proceeded smoothly. After the service, with only family remaining, Dan, unable to contain his impatience, broached the topic of Dad's inheritance. What the hell, Dan? We just laid Dad to rest today, Billy immediately reprimanded him, but Dan's glare silenced any further objections. You, the second son, just shut up. With a firm gaze, I intervened. We'll arrange a meeting to discuss the inheritance next week. For today, please just go home. At my words, the elder couple grunted and promptly left. The following week, the cheerful elder couple and the serious younger couple arrived at our home for the inheritance meeting. Facing them, I began. Firstly, I should mention that your father's inheritance amounts to about $30,000. What? Dan exclaimed, visibly taken aback by the news. I'd like to split this according to legal inheritance shares, with me taking half and each of you getting a quarter, I explained. Wait, hold on. Are you sure there's only $30,000? Dan persisted, sensing something amiss in my tone. I handed him a thick envelope. All the documents are in here. Please review them, I instructed. After inspecting the documents, Dan and Rebecca's faces twisted in frustration. Damn, Dad was really strapped for cash, huh? So we're only getting $7,500 each. That's too little. If it's this low, give us the house too, Dan demanded, clearly dissatisfied. Billy's response was swift and angry. Our mother still lives in that house. We won't give it up. It's because you wasted money on renovations that we're left with so little. If the inheritance is this small, the house stays with us, he declared firmly. Calmly, I addressed the irritated couple. This house was painstakingly renovated by your father so we could live here in our old age. I won't just hand it over. I'll keep it as long as I live. That's not fair. You can't keep everything to yourself, Dan protested, his fury evident. Billy intervened, restraining his brother. Dad was concerned about Mom until the end. You might not understand it, Dan, he said softly, looking at me with concern. We're going to announce our decision about the inheritance. Mom, you should take our side too. Dad would rest easy knowing that, Billy's wife added, nodding beside him. If they won't share, we'll gladly take their part, Dan insisted. That's impossible. Mom's living on her pension. It's tough. We who are working should be supporting her. Billy scolded his older brother and his wife sincerely, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Just because she's living on her pension doesn't mean we can give her money away. Dan retorted, unyielding. Exactly. Perhaps mother-in-law was planning to siphon off our money from the beginning, Rebecca added, her tone accusatory. The elder couple looked at me with disdain, their expressions sour and disrespectful. Stop acting like parasites. It's a nuisance. Elderly women living on pensions should keep out of everything except for weddings and funerals. Just stay quiet, Dan lashed out. Hey, that's enough. Billy intervened, but I kept my head down, fists clenched. Not only were they wishing for my husband's death, but they also complained about the inheritance and even labeled me as a parasite. I couldn't help but wonder where I had gone wrong in raising him. Regret flooded my heart, and tears threatened to spill from my eyes. But I couldn't afford to lose my composure in this moment. Gathering my feelings, I addressed Dan and Rebecca calmly. I understand what you're saying. Let's sever our ties. At my words, the elder couple looked momentarily surprised before breaking into smirks. Really? That's the best news I've heard, they remarked sarcastically as Dan and Rebecca hurried to leave. Before storming out, they threw one last barb at Billy and his wife, tauntingly calling them to take care of the parasite. As the door closed behind them, Billy and his wife rushed over to me. Mom, are you okay? They're just too awful. We're always by your side. Please don't be upset, they comforted me. Still looking down, I raised my face and met their eyes. Billy and I have something to tell you, I began. A few months later, while relaxing at home, Dan and Rebecca unexpectedly appeared, accompanied by Billy. What's going on? We've severed our ties, haven't we? Dan demanded, his voice raised. Indeed, come on in. I invited them, ignoring their aggressive tone. As they entered, their faces flushed with anger. Billy spoke up with an apologetic tone. Sorry, Mom. When asked about the house, I couldn't help but invite them in. That's fine for now. Everyone please come in, I said, leading them inside. But as soon as the eldest couple stepped into the living room, they began to raise their voices. What do you mean you're giving the house to Billy? You're disregarding us, they protested. I maintained my composure and explained calmly, Billy has promised to maintain the house and preserve your father's memories. That's why I've decided to leave it to him. Dan stared at me, taken aback. What do you mean? He questioned. Billy and Anne have been a great support to me. It's only natural, I replied warmly, thanking them. We're not here to hear that. You said you'd take over the house yourself, didn't you? The eldest couple retorted. Glancing at the eldest daughter-in-law, who seemed ready to explode, I elaborated. I thought I'd hand it over to someone who would respect your father's and my wishes. Besides, I've started receiving some rental income. Their surprise evident, I continued matter-of-factly. Remember last year when my father, your grandfather, passed away? Billy attended the funeral, but you couldn't because you were out of town. Well, your grandfather was a landlord who owned several buildings and apartments. Finally, the inheritance has been settled, and I've started receiving rental income. The eldest couple's faces displayed shock. We never heard anything about that, they exclaimed. About that rental income, how much are we talking about? Dan inquired. It's about $3 million a year, so it's easy for me to give one of the houses to my adorable son and his wife, I revealed. At this, Dan and Rebecca sprang to their feet. Wait, hold on a minute. If Billy and his wife get one, then we should too, they argued. Why should I split my assets with someone who called me a parasite? Wasn't it you who told me to stay away? I shot back sharply. Caught off guard, Dan and Rebecca began to stutter in response. I fixed them with a stern glare and pointed to the door. All right, the conversation is over. Please go home now. Wait, hold on, Mom. Please listen to me. Deanna approached me, flustered, and suddenly clung to my arm. I looked at him coldly. You have no right to call me Mom. Please, you can't just demand a share of the house and money too. We're struggling, the eldest daughter-in-law pleaded loudly. I raised an eyebrow. Struggling? What do you mean? I demanded. Dan hesitated before starting to explain. We thought we'd received Dad's inheritance and lived a bit too luxuriously. We kind of got into debt, he confessed. I forcefully shook off Dan's arm, feeling a surge of disgust. I didn't think you could be this stupid. This is the bed you've made, so you need to lie in it, Dan, I retorted sharply. That's just too cruel, the eldest couple protested, their faces crestfallen. I had the final say. From now on, I'll transfer my assets to Billy while I'm still alive. I won't give a penny to you who cut ties with me. Please never bother us again. Billy stood up to the deflated eldest couple. If you understand, then go home quickly. "Don't come near Mom or us ever again," he declared firmly, escorting them to the door. After that, the eldest couple apparently ended up going bankrupt from the debt they incurred. From their rundown apartment, you could hear Dan and Rebecca arguing night after night. For them, who couldn't manage this simple act of cherishing their family, a decent future probably isn't in the cards. As for me, since I passed the house on to Billy, I bought and moved into an apartment nearby that comes with caregiving services. Billy and his wife often come to visit, and they've recently had an adorable baby. I want to continue building a good relationship with Billy's family and cherish each and every day.